Hi everyone, this is the Drupal Core Cross Initiative meeting for July 24th, 2019. And we have three core committers, four core committers on the call, two Alexis, Ilari, and myself. So they're hopefully going to help unblock a lot of people in case you need to be unblocked. Let's start with the order that I have you on my screen. It's going to help me the best, and Adam is the first one.
Oh, wow. What a privilege. So yeah, I'm reporting for the media initiative, and the focus is currently WYSIWYG support for embedded media. There are 3 issues. One is done. We have an input filter in core which can render the Drupal media embed code. The next one that we're working on is representing an embedded media item in CK editor. So actually rendering a preview of it. That's actually going quite well. We have got, we have summarized the things that still need to happen. Most of them are done. It's very well tested. There's just a couple of, there was a little bit of a question about some CSS things, but I just had a call with Lowry and Christina, and that is now, we know what we're going to do there. And OK Nate is implementing. So that's chugging along. I think it's very important to get that issue to at least RTBC by the end of the week. I'm aiming for today. I'm doing a day where I'm only working on media so that we can get that in. If we wait any longer, I think the issue will stall, and that is risky. So basically, we're green for now, but we have to keep pushing. We have no blockers at this time. For the one thing that I do actually want to review and could actually be done very quickly, and I'm specifically speaking to the 4 committers on this call, is we do have a patch that adds test coverage and it just adds test coverage for how media and content moderation integrate. So when that's ready to go, that would be really helpful, since I think having that test coverage is actually a stable blocker, and adding test coverage to core is obviously very beneficial. So I can ping any one of you, I guess, later, probably one of the Alexes, about that. So that would be also nice to land ideally this week. But yeah, we're mostly in good shape. Any questions? No? All right. Well, thank you.
So I was on mute. So you'd have nothing to be unblocked right now because it's been unblocked by Larry and.
Yeah, we are not blocked.
Mm-hmm. What about the metadata issue?
The metadata override thing is one that is not a stable blocker. It has never been a stable blocker, and so we are not focusing on that for the moment. We're kind of talking about it still with Andre Chicks is on that discussion. Sean B is. You are. Hristo Chonov is also on it. So we're kind of still hashing that out, but I don't think that is not a priority for Drupal 8.8. It's important, but it's not a priority or a stable blocker.
Sure.
All right. I'm trying to make notes in the meantime. That's why it's a bit complicated. So I think Alex is up. Do you want to, or maybe you want to do CMI2, or should Fabian do CMI2?
I can leave that to Fabian if you're talking to this Alex.
Yeah, you, Alex. Yes. Fabian, then. Want to do CMI2?
Hi. Yeah.
Okay.
We just had a meeting just now, half an hour.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's summer, a bit slow, but we're very happy that the big API patch landed. So we're not really blocked anymore. So we can chug along, and I started working on the UI for the new module.
Mm-hmm.
So we will hopefully soon. It's always difficult to make any promises like that, especially now that it's summer and hot, and vacation times. But like the next step is to have like some module that people can look at and review and give feedback on, and then yeah, we will be on the way to hopefully soon have it.
So do you need feedback from Alex Brunstein, for example, in that module, or do you think you have enough?
So right now there's no patch to actually create, add more flesh to the module. Right now the module only contains the code that eventually will go back into core, like the core namespace and not the module itself. So once we have a patch, then we'll be very happy to have reviews on that. But like right now, the ball is on in our court, and like, yeah.
All right. So not blocked right now. That's good. I'm glad to hear. All right. Let's see. In the meantime, a bunch of people are complaining that we are full. So if anybody has other stuff to do and they don't want to.
Yeah, I'll drop a here.
Yeah, sorry.
No worries.
All right. I hope to keep our core committers to help unblock people. So the next one in my list with an initiative would be Andre.
Hello. So let me see. Since the last update, we have code written for, I would say, 90% of the things that we want to achieve for 8.8. And that contains quite some big changes to workspaces, some internal stuff, including upgrade paths, of course. And right now we are blocked on reviews, both for RTBC issues and needs review issues. I can give some concrete node IDs of.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should I say them out loud or just paste them in Slack?
I mean, if you want to talk about the specific issues, then sure, please say them out loud. If
Okay.
you just want to dumb them, feel free to dumb them, but you probably want to talk about them, I assume.
Yes. So one of the biggest changes that we want to do is that we want to remove the workspace association entity type that is used to track which revision is in a specific workspace, and replace it with simple storage, custom storage for that, for the same purpose. And this issue is blocked on two other issues that are bug fixes for Entity API. One of them is that we cannot install a new field during an entity update. So for example, when taxonomy terms are converted to revisionable, that's an entity update, we need to install a new field on that entity type. That's one of the issues that we are blocked on. And the other is that revisionable entity types cannot be uninstalled if their code doesn't exist anymore, which is something that we fixed in 8.7 even, but not for revisionable entity types, it seems. We fixed it for generic entity types. Anyway, so the node IDs, which are the highest level blockers, let's say, it's 305 6816 and 306 7024.
Oh, can you also paste the links because I failed to make note of the number?
Yep. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, so these are the two blockers for the rest of the work that we need to get done by 8.8. And I guess for the other issues, we can discuss them later I mean, they're not. We're not blocked on committers for that.
So do you need, so these ones basically blocked on committers, or do you need?
One of them, yes, and the other just a general review and then on committers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see. So the installing a new field storage definition one is RTBC. And
yeah, it was already reviewed by Francesco.
So Francesco seems to be still eligible to commit it.
Sorry?
So Francesco seems to have not worked on it, but reviewed it. So he's also eligible to commit it, I guess.
Right, yes.
But if either Alex's would like to take a look, that would be nice. I will also ping this to Francesco now.
All right. So in general, we are, I think, pretty much on track for getting workspaces to stable in 8.8. There are three major things that we want to do. The first one is this one about removing the workspace association entity type. Then providing support for sub workspaces. So we can have a hierarchical implementation of the dev stage live workflow, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one is about merging revisions between workspaces.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only one for which code is not written yet. But yeah, the other two are more important. I mean, merging has to come after of this because it has to take into account the hierarchy and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's about it for the workflow initiative.
All right. So I pinged the installing a new field storage definition one to Francesco. Any takers for the other one to review? Not right now, I guess. Well, okay. Let's see who's next here. Christina. Hello.
Hey, sorry,
Hey.
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe Laurie wants to actually talk about Claro because he's more up to date following daily the issues. But apart from specific issues on Claro, we've tagged several design components that are, or at least general components that need to be unblocked, both for the beta, a beta release for Claro, that is the one that we will need for Drupal 8.8, and also the stable ones to have actually Claro as stable, yes, a stable theme.
Mm-hmm.
And on the design side, we have a new designer joining that is going to work full time for a while. And let me find my notes. Yeah, we have several components that are being worked on, and the most important ones are the media library redesigned for Claro. But it's actually well, it needs some work because we need to do some research to actually see what's there right now and actually design everything. And also some important things that are around the corner is Views UI that we'll need to design it. And for example, the status report page and some other small components, and maybe Laurie can actually talk more about Claro itself, the development side.
So there is one issue that is still blocked on some kind of discussion happening with release managers, which is the toolbar issue. I sent a link here, so we have to kind of figure out how we're gonna embed that in the core. So it's basically blocked on I'm pasting another link. So this is the issue that is kind of blocking on it, and we have decided to go with an alternative solution, and we need a sign off on that from release manager, but I'm not sure where it should happen because of its contrib project. So should we write down the proposal in the contrib project and try to get release manager's comment there, or how should we approach that?
So the proposal is to make a core change though, right?
Yes.
And in that case, I would write it down in core because that's where you want to make the change.
So open any issue for that in core?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I think so. I mean, that's where you want to make the change.
Okay, I'll open that then.
Cool. So this is the move theme toolbar CSS to 7 theme is what you were talking about?
Yeah, so that's the blocking issue, but we might be able to do some workarounds on that if the release managers accept that.
Mm-hmm. And your other issue, just trying to fight with many windows here. And the other issue is?
It's the Claro issue about restarting toolbar.
Update. Yep. It's a nice design, by the way. Very nice. Okay. So that's blocked. Anything else blocked? I mean, we don't have release managers here, so unfortunately, we'll not be able to get you unblocked right away. Anything else that you need help with?
No, I think that's all.
Okay. Okay. So I need to bring that to a release manager. Cool. I will try to ensure that happens. And next up is Lucas. Hi, Lucas.
Hello. What do you wish for me to talk about?
What you wish to talk about? Do you want to talk about automated updates, or you want to talk about migrate, or you want to talk about everything?
Let me talk about migrate. There's not much for auto updates that I need help with. DA's unblocked me here in the last couple of days, so it's back on my plate to do some things. But we're making good progress on the auto update front.
Okay.
Let's see here. 2 issues that could possibly use another round of reviews and maybe a commit would be 2745797. Let's see if we can get that into Hangouts.
2745797. See.
And date field was RTBC and got kicked back and is back to RTBC again. So that's the second one. So let me talk the first one. The first one is validation for entity destination. It's an optional thing. Someone can go in and say, I want to validate my content entities now. And if it fails some form of validation, entity validation, it'll skip that row. It's been sort of a request for a long time, so this would be a good thing. It is optional because right now we do not do that, and it could potentially have backwards compatibility issues for folks that have been kind of trucking along with the current state.
Yeah, it could have quote unquote data loss consequences where your stuff is not migrated that you expected that would be.
Yeah, it would be bad, or has the potential. So it's an option, but folks can now turn it on. The other one is date field is empty after migrating from 7 to 8. This is for dates that are like time only. It was migrating them wrong, so that's now fixed. That's the major issues that I can see. Mike, do you have other thoughts in that space, or?
Only in the migrate space, really. The main kick right now is to do the multilingual revisions, because we've identified that as a blocker for opening the D9 branch. So Vicky has been working on that, and it's a very complicated problem space. So, and there's very few people that understand it, and I'm not even necessarily one of them, although I'm doing what I can. But that's kind of the top priority for migrate. The next one is trying to get some sort of an audit system in place to try and help some of the known issues that happen when you use the core UI to upgrade from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8. We'd like to get some of those issues identified in an audit step as you're running the update, and possibly even get some resolution from the user so that we can kind of tweak the migrations and not have those issues. So those are the two big ones. The first one, the migrate translation revisions, is a big one, blocking the D9 branch opening. The second one is a very, very high priority to have in place before we end of life Drupal 7, so that we can get more people moved over to Drupal 8/9. That's what I've got for migrate.
One thought on the entity validation one is, have we considered making it like the new default for like new things? Because the reason I ask is that over the last, I don't know, couple of years, we've really struggled with the update path for like Drupal minor versions, and that often is around corrupted entities sitting around which like do unexpected things. And one of the sources of these corrupted entities has been identified as like migrations. So
I hear what you're saying, Alex. The biggest one that I've seen is file entity references and link data. The files, we tend to have just files that get deleted on the source server and they don't show up, and it's better to kind of pull over the name of the file or something in a lot of cases. The other is links. We've had varying levels of validation on Drupal 7 and 6, and the link is sort of okay. It might just have like slash example.com or different things that are not valid links, but they would still prefer to get the data brought over. And then the first time they try to save the thing, when they look at it, //example.com is not right. I need to put HTTP : in front of that. So there's a lot of reasons why in some cases it might make sense just to dump the data into the destination. So I'm a little reluctant to say that validation turned on is good.
yeah, it's tricky. Like everything, it's all a trade-off. It's just like the sites which don't update is probably even worse. So, when you're choosing between your bad places, then probably the better place is to have a valid site than an invalid site.
Then maybe the auditing step would help. That would show you the impact of like.
Well, the ones we're looking at with auditing are more like you're picking an input format that no longer exists, and so it's a null formatter. Things like that. We weren't necessarily going to audit. It was more of a high low-hanging fruits that you can pick out pretty quickly without having to process the whole data.
Mm-hmm.
The links is probably the biggest one, and that has had issues. That's had issues with, for example, when you try to process it through and send it over to Apache, to Solr through Search API and such. That's had lots of issues in the past. But you know, the whole theory of let's move the data over. In a lot of cases, these legacy sites are harder to maintain than if they moved it over to 8 and then they fixed the data in 8. Once they move it over to the new system, rather than having to fix it before you can pull the data in. So we can maybe open up a like a follow-up to maybe set the defaults. But I think perhaps for now, having just let's have the API there, and we can see how folks like it, and then if we like it in in a month or so, we could turn it on as the default.
Sure. I mean, it's a great first step. So I see the trade-offs and agree with, like, at least giving people the ability to do it simply is a great place considering where we've been.
Yeah, and the audit step can also help a little bit, but we have to create individual audits looking for specific patterns and then identify what to do. And so it's great for specific things that we know are going to be issues, but trying to identify in general, oh, there's some corrupt data in your D7 database, you know, is not an easy thing to do. You know, we can specifically say, oh, this link, you know, these links look wrong. Should we just skip them and maybe adjust on that? But you know, the general, there's an infinite number of ways the data could be incorrect. So it's a little tricky to get something in this type of audit step where we're just trying to identify patterns and that we can do something about programmatically.
Yeah, I just meant that if we are going through all the content anyway to identify the patterns, we can say that if we are to drop invalid entities, then we can say that, by the way, we're going to drop 200,000 invalid entities from this migration because you're not good. And we may not be offering up a UI to fix 200,000 entities, but if we know that we're going to drop them, that could be a useful, like, inform people ahead of time that, by the way, expect this because this is how your migration is configured. I don't know. I just thought it's not a direction.
So yeah, I have no problem opening a follow-up. I just, as most developers, I'm opinionated, and I prefer to have, my opinion is we should hold off on, I prefer not to have validation on the content until I get to the new system.
Mm-hmm.
But some other developer would have a slightly different opinion. And so, you know, it's always easier to stay with status quo. Yeah, but let's have that debate in a follow-up.
Yeah, we need to keep backwards compatibility anyway. So we need to stay with the status quo by default for now. All right. Lucas, do you want to elaborate on where you are with auto updates?
Sure, I can do a quick update.
Do you have goals to get stuff into 8.8 direct?
So automatic updates is in a tricky spot. We're trying to incubate a lot of the parts of it in Contrib. And we're doing changes on the DA infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So DA unblocked a soft blocker last week. So first step is to do a public safety announcement. So that's sort of the first phase of automatic updates. And Michael Hess has stuff on a dev site set up, and Drum has reviewed it, and things are looking good. I don't know if it's live or if it is. Training hasn't happened yet, from my understanding. So that'll eventually get to a place where we can then, when we have some type of a Drupal-ageddon type of event happen, we can more publicly advertise that with this automatic updates module. It'll do something akin to a Drupal set message on every page, similar to what you get with the update module saying you've got security updates on the site. So once we get that sort of more stabilized, that'll probably come back into the update module, because it just doesn't make sense not to move that one. It just gives us more visibility for things that we already have. The follow-up things are probably more likely to stay in contrib during the life of Drupal, definitely Drupal 7, and possibly 8. And that's where we're actually doing things in place where we're updating and checking to see if you can actually be eligible for updates. So we've got about, I would say, 8 or 9 what we've called readiness checkers. They are not plugins, they're tagged services. And anyone can tag their service this way, and it goes out and just checks, is the hard drive read-only? Do you have a database update that needs to be applied? Do you have modifications of files? Which can happen because of hacks, where folks are just sort of modifying core, or if they're applying a patch. So those will happen. Some of them, and we've categorized these tagged services as 2 levels: errors and warnings. Warnings are just sort of, hey, you've got less than 100 meg of disk space. There's a risk here. You might not be able to apply the update because, well, you might not have enough disk space. But then there's also things like, hey, your hard drive is read-only. We can't apply the update. You're deployed on Pantheon, you're deployed on Platform SH, you're deployed on Acquia, someplace that has the hard drive remounted as read-only. So what I've just described, all of those things are now in and committed for both 7 and 8. Pretty decent coverage on 8. We've kind of not done as much on 7 because working with simple test is harder. But it's a backport, pretty much straight logic backport, and commit the code on 7. The next piece after this is to actually apply an in-place update. The in-place update, we have a passing green test on a patch that's not been committed, where it takes what we're calling a quasi-patch zip file, and it extracts the contents of this zip file. The contents of the zip file are the files that have changed between 8.6.7 and 8.6.8 or whatever version range. They're the entire content, so we don't have to deal with patch utils or git apply or any of that stuff. It's copy paste over top the previous over the files. As a part of this zip file, we also have a manifest that shows files that have deleted, and we can then go through and delete files that are no longer in the site. So that's passing green. We're still waiting on the DA to kind of take the contents of that zip file and work out a process to generate this quasi-patch archive. All these things are going to be on FTP, Drupal.org. We will, for both this and for modified files, like for the readiness check, hey, you've got your site hacked up or something, we kind of are needing you to be on a stable tagged release of Drupal core or a patch. Dev branches are pretty hard to really know if you're on a hacked version or what the difference is. So yes, could we do this? Eventually, yes, we could, but for the 80% solution, we're kind of requiring you to be on a tagged version. We're also sort of, for this initial cut of things, requiring you to be not using Composer, just because that has more complications than we wanted to deal with for the first version of this. So this whole update in place piece is still going to be incubating and contrib for a while. And we've got a working solution using tests, but we still have to get the FTP site sort of the infrastructure there for us to do updates in place. It works pretty well. It's nice. We've made a lot of progress. So we'll just see how things shake out over the next couple of months as we get these things to land.
So you will need core support for the PSA feed display thing when it hits. Which do you plan that for 8.8, or it depends?
It depends on, and at that point we'll even be able to tag a contrib version. I would say we'd want to tag a contrib version that's not the dev branch alpha and RC for 7 and 8, and try that out for a couple of weeks to see if folks report any errors. The issue is, how do you know if you've got a PSA until you have a PSA, and does it work, and get feedback on the PSA? So we just got to have someone go out and find some really nasty bugs.
Need to have a bug bounty to have a PSA as well. All right. Okay. That sounds good.
So that's a quick update. A lot of it ends up being contrib at this point, though, because it's just easier to incubate it there. One other part is we're also looking into libsodium for hashing contents and digitally signing. And it's still in the theoretical phase. But David Strauss has put a lot of thought into it at this point and is working on a solution that we will probably just adopt once he has some more working code. Obviously, Pantheon would like to use this for some of their internal stuff too, I'm guessing. So, but we will at some point be able to sign some of the packages. Some of these quasi patches are we're going to have a SHA-SUM file for telling if you've hacked your core. And that SHA-SUM file will also be signed, and we'll just be able to then, with greater assurance, be able to tell whether or not things have been adjusted by someone who's nefarious.
Also nice. Great. Okay.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
That was a great update. Thank you. So if the modified files service detects that you have modified files that are not in the quasi patch, is that an error or a warning or like nothing?
So I'm envisioning at this point that it's a warning, and I think it actually is a warning right now. If you've got I think we just say your risk of being able to apply updates is that you won't be able to automatically apply updates because you've got modified files, and then we list what files they are. So if it's a file in book module or something, which we've never touched in like 3 years or something, well, someone who's in the know can probably say, yeah, I don't care about that. But if it's a change to like, entity or maybe what's one of the system module or some other bootstrap include file or whatever, which we seem to always patch when security updates come out, you might be able to then in your pre-flight check be more aware of whether or not. And then when it comes to time to actually auto update, the plan is to use that same service to check to see of those 7 files that have changed, can we still apply? If we can, great, apply it. So that's my current working plan.
Okay, so it's a warning before we know whether it's in the manifest, and then once we learn that, if then after we download the manifest, we learn that the files do overlap with something that's modified, then we do not apply it.
Correct.
Okay, cool.
That's the idea. The readiness checks will run on cron every 3 to 6 hours or whatever cron usually runs. We do run, although I don't know how helpful it is because it's a cron job too, but we do run a readiness check that says your cron is not running most frequently enough, and warn them about that. So, we're trying to give them as much forewarning as possible. We've also got it so they can receive an email update saying the status of their readiness checks. All these things are out there. If they've got their site really badly set up, they still won't know about it, but hey, we're trying.
Yep.
Any other?
I'm going to paste the link to the code, so if anyone wants to look at it or review the module in its current state, they can.
All right. So next one in my list would be Michael, I guess, on Drupal 9. Probably has the best review right now. Mike.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, at least on the stuff I've been working on, the deprecation fixes in core have been going really, really well. We've got it down to about 25 issues, all of which have issues filed that need to be fixed. A dozen of those are in needs review, a couple of RTBC, including the big one, which is the Drupal L method. So once that's in, we'll be knocked down to double-digit instances in core of improperly deprecated things and down to a very manageable number. So that progress is good on that. I haven't done much with Symfony 4.5 stuff in the last few weeks since Symfony 4.3 came out. We kind of went through those issues, and they're in a development cycle where we haven't had much changing on the static releases of Symfony 4 yet. So, but we have been kind of keeping an eye on Symfony 5 development as they're cleaning stuff up. But we've kind of identified those issues, and they're just kind of in a holding pattern at the moment while we're waiting for them to kind of finalize what their next releases are going to be. So nothing new really to report on the Symfony front as far as Drupal 9 goes.
So there's not much that we can do in Symfony 5 right now because they're still deciding what to change and how.
Yeah, I mean, really all we can do is monitor what they deprecate in Symfony 4. And so we did that when Symfony 4.3 came out a month or two ago. And then right now, Symfony 4.4, which will come out at the same time as Symfony 5.0, is currently in early development. So, I've been keeping an eye on it a little bit, but, only checking on it every month or so at this point because it's in such early development. Don't really know. I'm getting the sense that trying to release Drupal 9 on Symfony 5 is going to be very problematic, but all I can do really is report on it, and those decisions we'll have to make a little bit later this year, and they'll be made well above my head. So,
the last I've heard from Jess is that her and Catch believes that they now came around to believing that it will probably be problematic. So their target is more like be as compatible with Symfony 5 as we can sensibly be, but probably release with Symfony 4 or something.
Which sounds right, and that's kind of my technical assessment of what I'm seeing at the moment. So yeah, I think that's right. I know they want to get us to a point. I know the RMs want to get us to the point where we're releasing majors very shortly after Symfony releases a major. So, Symfony 5.0 comes out in December. We want to release our next Drupal major 6 months, 9 months later. So we have the longest possible support with that Symfony version, which, I get. but the trick is just, there's not a lot of dev time to adapt. So, and to skip 2 Symfony majors to get to that point is going to be just cause all sorts of BC problems for us. So how we get to that point, whether it's, release Drupal 9 and then release Drupal 10 on a much shorter cycle so that we, 10 comes out on Symfony 5 reasonably early in the Symfony 5 cycle, and we have a few shorter cycles or whatever. That's a whole nother long debate. But yeah, I do tend to agree that trying to skip 2 Symfony versions in one major cycle is just going to cause a lot of BC headaches. But that's a bigger discussion.
Yeah, depending on how much they keep changing, I guess they will maybe stabilize more in the future. I don't know.
Right.
So I'm looking at the Symfony 4 thing to investigate problems with Symfony 4 now, or allow Symfony. Oh, do we have the investigate one? Because the allow Symfony 4 to be installed in Drupal 8 seems to be down to 11 fails, but they don't. I don't see the relation to Symfony 4. They're like testing problems with.
Mm-hmm. Well, like I said, I haven't checked it in a little while. It very well might be. I need to go back and probably just get caught up on that particular issue. It's possible that because we don't test with Symfony 4 outside of that issue, we introduced new code since the last time that test passed that was not Symfony 4 compatible, and we may need to go address it. So it's just one of those. Again, I only check on it every month or so at this point, just because of where everything is in the dev cycles. It would be impossible to try and keep up on a daily basis without having some form of automated testing that always tested our latest code with Symfony's latest code and sent us an alert. It's a lot to try and manually set that test up too regularly. So
yeah, that's always the dream. Yeah, we'll send this for a retest right now and then see what the result's gonna be.
I'll put it in my queue to get kind of an updated Symfony 4, Symfony 5 issue list before the next D9 readiness meeting a week from Monday, and let's plan on a new report figured out by then.
Yeah, I'm happy to help with looking at that as well in case they figure out how they're related to Symfony, which are not apparent right now, but that's not surprising. All right. And then we have Ryan,
Hi.
composer.
Well, howdy. So the Composer Initiative and the core cross initiative meeting are overlapping right now. So
I know, sorry.
I'm simultaneously managing the meeting, which looks like it's just me and Greg right now over in the Composer channel. So I could dual update. I mean, it's a model of efficiency, actually.
Very live.
So the Composer Initiative has been moving along at a pretty good clip. I'm pretty happy with where things are going. There's kind of several issues floating around that are virtually RTBC. One of them we're kind of stuck on is not stuck on. It's been RTBC for a few days. But the Wikimedia merge plugin that is a original solution to how do we manage the fact that we've got our core directory, which is really the whole bulk of the product, and then we've got this like product scaffold setup where it's one directory lower, and we've got a root composer JSON and a composer JSON and core and all these different things. So formerly we're using this Wikimedia merge plugin to merge everything back together, but part of the strategy moving forward was to remove that so that we could actually properly scaffold files out and do stuff more in the vein of the way the de facto standard recommended way to use Composer with Drupal that's unofficial becomes a more of official way. Mm-hmm. So if anybody out there has any thoughts about Wikimedia merge plugin, I encourage anyone to check in on that issue. But basically the idea is we're stripping it out. We don't need it now. We've got better ways to do things. But there's somewhat of a question of whether or not anybody's relying on it. So it's hard to know whether or not this is a BC break or whether or not it's just going to be sort of a BC break for some people with a workaround to un-BC break that, or what counts as an API in this case. So that's sort of where we're at on that. We've got a couple of the Drupal has traditionally been able to be installed just like the whole shebang in your web root, which best practices over the years have dictated that you don't do that, that you put all your code outside of webroot, and then the only thing that's in webroot is like your index.html and the assets that need to be served. So, you know, someday we would like to get to the point where it's not like that, and it can be set up that way using the templates that the Composer Initiative is going to have, but we're still planning on supporting that for the time being. So we still need to have things like the core vendor cleanup plugin, which strips out potential security risk test kind of things. Like PHP Unit used to have a remote code as execution as a service sort of thing sitting in your directory if you had your dev dependencies out there. So so we've got some things like that we're like trying to migrate from the kind of base Drupal out to everywhere else. I'm sorry, to be able to be used as a plugin separately from the just core script that's in there now. Beyond that, I think there's a random fail that the scaffolding introduced that we're kind of looking at. I think we have a solution for that. I think we just need to move that forward onto our TBC. I've dug around in the Drupal CI logs, and it's infrequent, but happens often enough. Like since that got committed a couple weeks ago, it's happened about 6 times. So, which of course it's file system interaction, so and temp directory stuff, and you know all the kinds of things where when you have a test bot with 32 different processes running all at the same time, and they're all trying to do the same kind of work, and they all interfere with each other, that it can sometimes random fail. So, but we do have a workaround for that. I think we're close. Let's see. And then the templates is the last portion, which is once the templates are in core, then we can change Drupal.org's packaging to rebuild core such that the tarballs that people download are already built using Composer, and they won't have to do anything special to convert them to a Composer-based website. If they choose to start using Composer or find out they need a module that requires Composer, they don't have to like start over or do a conversion process. So that'll be almost like the end of phase 1 for the Composer Initiative, like once these get in. So these are all real close. Looking forward to it. The final thing is that now the Composer Initiative is starting to spread out into the other things that are wrong with Composer. So the way that we build core, we're going to start focusing on things about like how to actually solve the core lives in vendor problem, and scaffolding the assets back out into the web root, and how to maybe not have core ship with all of its modules, but instead have them be requires and be able to have an install profile that just requires the modules you need and does not ship with every single module that core comes with. Using subtree splits. So these are all things that we're like looking at to be like actually compose a Drupal. But once this stuff gets in, then I think there will be a lot of documentation, probably like some distribution maintainer reach outs, because we might be like, actually, you can build your distributions this way. And then when we build core or your distro, it all gets built using Composer and everybody is happy again. Because I know things like Lightning has to ignore its own tarball and says, don't use the tarball. So these are things that, will be solved soon. I don't know if there's anybody that has any concerns about the build process for core or any questions for me, but that's kind of where we're at right now.
I have the one question that I posted on the merge plugin issue.
Yes, me and Greg were just talking about that.
Yeah.
So I've got some questions about the BC compatibility with that.
Yeah. So just for everyone else on the call, it's like so if you have custom code that you're building out for your project, how do you use how are we thinking about you using Composer to manage the any Composer dependencies that those custom modules introduce. So like, what if they were following the same as contrib? Then they would have their own composer JSON, and then it would just work when you run composer install. And the only way that can happen at the moment is with the merge program, and you telling your root composer JSON to merge your custom modules in as well. But obviously, if we remove the merge plugin, then that doesn't work anymore. So what are the options?
Well, yes, except the problem is, so ultimately one of the issues is you only have the composer merge plugin in your root composer JSON if you started from Drupal, right? If you said composer create project Drupal. Now, if you do that and then you go to upgrade, you run into the same problem that is like a classic, like this is why you shouldn't start with Drupal, is that then you've composer required a bunch of modules and your lock file is different and your composer JSON's different. And then when you go to upgrade, you have this giant nasty merge problem because core is now, it's trying to overwrite its composer lock and composer JSON. So basically there is no clean upgrade path for those people currently. So the suggestion has always been, we'll change the change the require for Drupal core to a replace and do these other things. And then from that point forward, your composer JSON, your composer lock file won't be modified by upgrades because that's the only way that you can do this. And so there's part of it where it's like, well, there's a risk if we remove it from composer JSON, but people won't actually get those changes because they can't. And so that's one of the issues. The second issue is that, those instructions do say to add the Wikimedia merge plugin to your composer JSON to make it work. And so there is sort of a implied, you've got to do this. You shouldn't expect that it's done for you in there. And then finally, all of the instructions that say how to build a site with Composer, especially if you're using, contrib module or custom modules with your own dependencies. I have a tendency to believe that the people that are doing something that advanced are also following the other best practices of, using the Drupal Composer Drupal project. So those two things together, it's like it could be somewhat of a BC break, or somebody could run into a bump or hiccup. But I have a feeling it would be hard to cause those problems for those people, and because I don't see how we can actually ship a change to their root composer JSON and then still be managing a site with that, and unless they're actually just going through this merge problem every single time they upgrade. And that's really the sort of like so. But on the other side of it, it's like, what if we did just leave the composer Wikimedia merge plugin in the require, not use it, just have it sitting there so it's still available if somebody was trying to use it. And that's where I'm not sure if that has a negative impact on the site with or without it. Like, does it still try and run through your whole file system looking to merge stuff and then decides not to, or does it only base that off of what's in your existing root composer JSON instructions? So that's sort of where we're at right now on that. How do you feel about that, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I just think we need to have clear instructions for the situations that people might be in, and I think you're right that there's probably very few people who are in the situation, and if they are, they've probably added the merge plugin themselves and they're managing it that way. I mean, for me, generally, when I work on a project, I have custom code. I include any dependencies in the root composer JSON and move on because they're custom. It's custom code for the project, and who cares? But unfortunately, we have instructions on core telling people to use the merge plugin just as we're trying to remove it from core. So, that's why I brought it up.
Yeah,
I think we have to be mindful of that.
And it's sensible to be like, well, who is this actually going to affect if we've told people to do this? But the instructions that we have, especially those user docs, are they've evolved over time, and the best practices evolve over time. And sometimes the best practices that have evolved don't necessarily make it all the way into the docs. And so sometimes you get these weird situations where, like the fact that someone suggests that you add it to your composer JSON, that wasn't originally there. So that must have been somebody who didn't have the Wikimedia merge plugin in their root because they were using a different way of doing this and said, oh, this doesn't work unless I add this. And so it's like, okay, well, they already didn't have it. So I think,
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyways.
Cool.
So I guess the next step is I'm unsure about is whether it's, do we just need more documentation, or do we want to be super risk averse and go the other route of determining how much of an impact just leaving it in there is as a kind of side effect. And this is where, like, I'm never really sure what the right thing is with, core as far as our risk aversion tolerance. Like, do we absolutely positively want to make it so that nobody has a problem, or do we want to, be like, well, there's so few of you that are going to have this problem, here's some docs to help you out?
It's a release manager call. So that's what we probably ought to do, is document on the issue all the thoughts that you've just outlined about why it's probably not an issue, and then put like some caveats about, just in case, here's why it might be, and then let the release managers make a choice.
All right.
And then put it needs release manager review, and then ping them the issue is what I would do.
Perfect. That helps. Because yeah, I mean, I feel like we come across a lot of weird BC sort of things where, as another example, the core requirement for being able to support Drupal 8 and Drupal 9 modules simultaneously. There's an issue that we're working on where the core version key, being able to make that actually use Semver. But there's a couple of strange places in core that use that version key, specifically translation server. It's in the URL, right? So it says go to ftp.drupal.org / translation /8.x / the version number of the module. Well, we want modules to work with both versions, so we want to just get rid of that entirely. And so it's easy. We changed it on Drupal.org to accept all, and you could just change that 8.x to all. We don't have to care about the core version key because the actual version of the module is embedded in the request string anyway. So it'll find the right version. The core version number isn't really relevant in this case, so we could just get rid of it. But a user could set the URL to a different translation server. Now, the question then is, like, has anybody ever done that? The possibility exists, but do we have to worry about that sort of BC? And that's kind of the question where it's like, oh man, the fact that we added this strange feature and we have no way of knowing whether someone's using it, but the assumption and the gut instinct is it's not being used. So, I mean, are all of these decisions basically release manager decisions? Is that where this is?
That one certainly sounds it. I mean, generally, if there's an API, there's a rule of thumb which says that if there is an API for something, then someone's probably using it for something that it's probably not meant to be used for. And even if there isn't an API for something, someone probably is still using that piece of code that's marked internal and they're not supposed to use for something. And so, I mean, it's just the way it is. Yeah. But I have never heard of anyone using a custom translation server.
I don't even know what that would be for. I mean, and it's for all your translations. It's not like, for this module, get my translations for this thing I want to distribute.
No. You can do that per module in info file.
Oh, you can?
Yeah. So you can do, like, have a bunch of custom modules that you are, like, let's say, I don't know, like you have a distribution that you are sending to, like, you're setting up for a bunch of customers, and then you could have a translation server for your modules that you may be not putting on Drupal.org or something. I don't know why, because it connects to internal services or whatever. And then you can provide translations on your translation server for your own modules. I don't think that caught on, or that's like any significant number of people doing that, or I don't know an example. So probably it's not used. But yeah, they will need to
that's the question, is like, our solution of just change it to all and skip the 8.x. It's like, are those other translation servers expecting 8.x? That's if they even exist, and how would we even know they exist?
Yeah, there's a default pattern in the localization server module that sets up how the URLs are constructed and how they are understood. So that's how they would be set up, maybe, but that's customizable patterns, and then you can customize the pattern in the info file as well. So those people, I think, will need to just adapt to that change. I think it's not a big impact change. There's hopefully, probably not too many people using that. All right, I think we are well over time. So any other things that we should discuss, or all good? All right, well, I'm glad that we managed to unblock a few things. Heard a lot of good progress. Congrats, everyone. And in the meantime, somebody I haven't seen who committed the Drupal L deprecation patch. Yay! So I'm running the deprecation testing again. So it'll be fun to see the results now. Alex Spot committed, while we were on the call. Nice stuff. All right, so thanks everyone for coming.
I'll compile that new deprecation because I got a couple of tweaks to the PHP script too.
Perfect. Great.
All right.
All right.
See you guys.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks.